What is going on, y'all? Welcome to 8 Cubes. I'm Cam Best. He's Lambie Series. We are here to talk about the 8 most important topics in Marvel Snap, and we have a lot of topics to talk about today. I guess it's the same 8 as normal, but there were a lot of contenders to get into those 8 slots.
Yes.
First up is Surtur, the Season Pass card coming out on Tuesday. He is a 3/5 that gets plus 3 every time you play a card with 10 or more power. I consider this card one of the most obviously pushed cards they have ever released. It is an
Yep.
extremely powerful card that has a massive amount of stats on it that fills 2 roles for the tens deck, which is already almost good. Role number 1 is you can play it on 3, and by turn 5, if you play 2 other tens, it will make your Scar free. So there is that. Number 2, it is going to be unapproachably large. You play a Scar and something else, it's going to get to 14. If you have your nut curve of just Surtur into 10, 10 Scar, that is a 14 power 3 drop. It is extremely, extremely large. I understand what they were going for when they designed it for this role. They were like, we need this card as a 3 drop to scale upwards to enable the Scar discount. That said, it fills not just that role, but also the role of Thena for the deck, basically. It is a
Yes.
combination Thena and other Scar, effectively. It is the best possible card for this archetype to ever receive. It is one of the stronger cards that I think I've ever seen. What do you think about it, Lambie?
Yeah, so we mentioned earlier that we had so many contenders for like topics for this week. It's true because like I was telling KM that I really like almost every single I like every single card that's coming out next month, right? It's all like fun cards and powerful cards as well. Surtur being the battle pass card. I think it's like you said, just a simple, strong, and good card that is meant to be played in a particular deck, which is, the the tens deck, essentially. It is literally like, I mean, you can call it the Angela of the tens deck, the Tina of the tens deck. It's the bridge, the early game
Yes.
bridge for the tens deck, right? Initially we used to run like a lot of random things in early game. This one is just like an auto include, right? Because firstly, 3/5 is great. That scales naturally with whatever else you want to play in the tens deck, So I'm really very excited for this card just because I get to play. I guess you can call it big dumb idiots again, but like you get to play a lot of just big cards, and then you have a scaler that gets bigger as you play big cards. I feel like not everything needs to be complex, and this card is just simple good.
I do worry about just how incredibly non-interactive the mirrors will be, because if one of
Right.
you has this and the other one doesn't, the game just ends. Like, it's just
True.
absolutely over. There's nothing either of you can do about it. Especially because when I think about how the deck is going to have to play out, it's probably running a lot of like anti-interaction type things. It's looking at, running, Cosmo and armor and things of that
Mm-hmm.
nature. And it is just not going to be able to like beat the mirror with kind of interaction. So the mirror is just going to be about numbers. And the person who has this card is going to have way more numbers both on this card and because of the Scar. Right now, this deck is currently playing a Psylocke to accelerate a 4 drop out on 3, so you can play a 10 power guy on 3, a 10 power guy on 4, and a 10 power guy on 5. That's crazy. That's the lengths that we're going to now, and Surtur just gives you that for free. Oh, and he's bigger than most of those cards anyway. Surtur on 3 is analogous to me to Agent Venom on 2. If you're playing a mirror and that happens to
Yes.
you, you are getting snapped and you are probably supposed to leave. Extremely, extremely powerful card. Cannot stress that enough.
Yeah, I'm just thinking a bit about the curve since we talked a bit about like tech cards for this deck, right? Like I think you just find the best one drop you can play, like I don't know, Sable or Bob or something big, right? And then on turn 2, armor makes a lot of sense. Cosmo makes a bit less sense because you kind of want to slam this on 3, right? So I guess armor is probably just the best. I'm wondering, like in this kind of like just big cards deck, is there room to play like tech for the mirror? Like what can it really be? Like because you really want to be playing big cards every turn. Do you really have space or time to play attack?
It's probably going to be Shadow King because he goes in everything, right?
Once
And he
again.
does hit Surtur, right? So there is that. But it's also just like, this is just a really strikingly powerful package that doesn't seem to provide a lot of flexibility. I almost
Mm.
wish Thanos was still around because at least there'd be like more variety in how this deck manages to play out. As is, it's just going to be like the tens deck with 12 cards just doing the thing that it does every single time, and there's not going to be a lot of flex in it is my worry. It doesn't really feel like a very flexible package because so much of the deck is going to be predicated on I need to stop my opponent from doing this stuff. And that is just, or from interacting with the stuff that I'm doing. The interesting thing about that, though, is if there is a deck that is able to go over the top of that, that can just beat the tens deck, right? Because the tens deck, like, let's say there's a deck that's able to play Mobius to make the Scar not matter, play Shadow King to make the Surtur not matter, and have a lot of points. I mean, that sounds like a pretty easy matchup to me. It does seem possible to beat. Next up is Frigga, a card that I think reads interesting and exciting, but in practice, or I guess in theory, I can't really say in practice, I haven't played with the card. But like, whenever I try to come up with a specific role for this card, I sort of blank on it a little. What it wants to do is be paired with either cards that have discounts, like Anti-Venom cards, for example, or Scar, even, or cards that gain green power and you can then replay, such as symbiotes like Venom and Carnage, or cards like Sage. Those seem to be the sort of two groups of cards that this wants to be partnered with. And I worry that that might not actually work. I don't really know the right way to say this, but I do have some concerns about whether or not that actually makes enough sense for you to do. And this card costing 3 makes it a very awkward thing to pair with any of this stuff. Because if you want to play it on 5, which you usually do, you want to be like hitting something that costs 2 and scales, or costs 2 after a discount that you're then going to replay on 6. It's just when I think about where I would actually practically apply this card, I kind of get lost a little bit, despite the fact that the text is interesting and strong, and copying stuff has typically been good, and Nico is very good when she does that, but Nico costs a third of what this card does.
Yep. Yeah, all right. So what I want to do with Frigga is I want to copy like Mockingbirds, I want to copy Scars, I want to copy all these like stuff that could get cheaper, right? But the problem is like for these the stuff that I want to copy to get cheaper anyway, they kind of need a bit of setup, which is very difficult to do, right? So I guess what realistically will happen with this card is like you play a Tina on turn 2, and then you play this on turn 3 to get yourself another Tina, and then I guess you can set up for like multiple Tinas on like but it's kind of a bit of effort. Yeah. So what you said made a lot of sense, which is this 3 costs like having this card at 3 costs like kind of really limits what you can do with this thing, and like I feel like even if you pull off the dream scenario of copying a super high value like buff to 1 drop or like 2 cost premium card, it doesn't happen as often as you think. So I feel like we were looking at Surtur, that was just like easy good power. This one feels like effort, too much effort to make good, so I'm curious to see where we land with this card. As much as I really like the effect, I do think it might be a little bit too difficult to trigger because of its relatively awkward cost.
Yeah, your comment about Thena actually got me thinking, right? Like, if you go like Kitty Pryde Thena on 2, and then you play this in Kitty Pryde on 3, and then you get it's good. The Thena you copy is going to have the power from the turn, or Kitty Pryde Thena on 3, then you play this and Kitty Pryde on 4. And the Thena you copy is going to have 3. You'll play it on 5, presumably with another card. It'll get to 6. It'll get to 9. That's not bad. But
Not bad.
I do think that really triggered a brainwave in me, which is the deck this card wanted to go in was Ravonna Renslayer Thena. That's where it wanted to be, because it could do stuff like that, and then it could copy Sages. And the issue is, Agent Venom came out, and you don't do that anymore. No one plays Ravonna
You don't want to do that anymore as well.
So like, this is it wants to be in a bad version of a good deck. It wants to be in the bad version of the powerful Iron Man, Mystique, Sage, Ravonna deck, which is the bad version, of course, of the Agent Venom deck. And that's actually like, that's what you're mentioning of that triggered in me, because it's like, you know what, that isn't actually all that bad, but the issue you run into is that it's just worse than just playing the card Agent Venom. And that's sort of where I wonder if she's ever going to find a home, because of all the stuff like that. That's like a solidly tier 2.5 thing to do. It's just like strictly worse than something else. And that is kind of an awkward situation if that's where you think her home is.
Okay, so there is one more place we can run this card. This is also sort of possibly a destroy card, isn't it? Like you can copy slightly bigger Carnages, bigger Venoms. Like, yes, the problem is still that she costs 3. But if you copy a Carnage, it's like 2 mana for like sort of buff stats, So it's something, right? It's actually something, because like at least the stuff that you're copying is like it does something. Like it does
Yeah.
work for the archetype, like destroy stuff.
I wonder if you could get like a Deadpool big enough or a Death cheap enough that this would make sense to do there.
Deadpool more likely, I would say.
I like maybe there's like a Death deck that wants to do this. Again, it's like it wants to be played with things that have a lot of green power, or I guess the other way to phrase it would be have a lot of green energy, right? Or a very small number of green energy, right? Like Death gets to, 1 or 2, and it's a great green number to copy. But that's what this card wants. She's seeking out green numbers. Anti-Venom in review. I still feel like people comment on my stream all the time and they're like, hey, do you still think Anti-Venom is good? And it's like, yeah, I do. The card is strong. I think the card is good. The last time I remember feeling this kind of disconnect between my evaluation of a card and the community's evaluation of a card was Ajax. It's not as strong as then. I was much more sure Ajax was good. But the more I play with Anti-Venom, the more I'm just like, yeah, this Pixie Anti-Venom stuff, it's just good. Luke Cage Anti-Venom, it's just good. You get the access to a good tech card, you get a good 4/7 body, you have massive combo upside off of that. It's just a good thing to do. It's strong, and it gives you an edge in mid-range mirrors because you are able to cheat, and your opponents often aren't able to cheat as hard. You're closer to a fair deck, you're playing relatively fair cards, except when they combo with the other cards in your deck, and you're not doing anything fair at all. And Anti-Venom is quite good. I honestly do believe that. I'm not saying it's like, you must go out there and buy this. But if I were doing like a tier list of cards, this is like a solid B, maybe a B plus, I think.
Yeah, with Anti-Venom, I feel like every single time, I feel like people are also like not realizing that when they low roll with it, it doesn't mean that it's a bad card. Because sometimes you play Anti-Venom on turn 4 and then you hit like a 1-drop and you're like, oh, this card sucks. But then when you hit the 6-drop out of 5, right, you're just like, oh, this card's amazing. Like it really depends on your deck composition as well. Like I don't think you can judge a card just based on like, how should I put it, some of the low rolls, because I feel like if you build the deck to high roll a certain thing and you miss, it doesn't mean that the deck or the card is bad. It's just that you missed because it's a card game, So like, I guess if you build your deck well enough such that Anti-Venom has good enough hits, the times where you miss is just all too bad. And then the times where you hit is like, yes, this is what my deck is supposed to do.
Right, and for some reason, people are totally okay with that in the same kind of body with Wiccan, but they're not okay with that with Anti-Venom. Everyone understands that Wiccan's like a pretty solid mid-range core because it lets you be a mid-range deck while going over the top of other mid-range decks. And you have to make a lot of sacrifices in order to make that work. Like, you have to either play Quicksilver or play like 3 or 4 1-drops and a bunch of 2s, right? That's a real sacrifice that you have to make. And Anti-Venom, the sacrifice that you have to make is play Luke Cage and draw the right stuff. Like, it's just like, like, I'm not saying it's easier to trigger than Wiccan or necessarily better than Wiccan, but it's a very similar card, and it almost reminds me of that, like, flirting versus harassment meme, where Wiccan is the top panel, and the bottom panel is Anti-Venom, and they're like, they're saying the same thing, they're doing the same thing, but the community really likes one and really doesn't like the other, and I feel like they're a lot closer than people think. One of the major effects that Anti-Venom has had on the meta is bringing back Alioth in a big way, bringing back Luke Cage in a big way, and bringing back Mobius and Mobius in a big way. And this has sort of hedged the metagame in. Now, normally that sounds like a bad thing, right? But when I say hedged the metagame in, what I mean is it's pushed meaningfully against the decks that were the best. These Agent Venom decks that are now a little bit more vulnerable to this random Alioth crap, randomly getting high rolled by stuff. The bounce decks have splash damage from Mobius. The Sarah decks have splash damage from Mobius and Luke Cage because they all run US Agent. And so all of these very powerful Agent Venom decks, they're not necessarily dramatically worse. I still think they're among the best decks in the game, but these were very clearly the best decks in the game. And now they are not that. And I think that is a meaningful move towards the metagame opening. There's a lot of different things you can play and argue we're top tier right now. I feel like when I did the tier list, there were more decks that I considered during the process of that to be tier 1 or tier A, however you want to do it, and 0 decks that I considered to be tier 0 or tier S. And that is really remarkable, especially considering everyone was like so up in arms about Agent Venom in the first place. The way in which these sort of tech cards have pushed against these dominant strategies is really interesting to me. And I am a little worried that this equilibrium gets totally disrupted when our boy Scar comes out, or not Scar, our boy Surtur comes out and just starts tenning people.
Yeah, I actually think what Agent Venom has done for this meta is that, like, for the most part, yes, there is a defined
Wait,
like
I need to
best
clarify. Agent or anti?
agent.
Okay.
I want to talk about Agent Venom first because that's the
Okay.
one that makes the meta good. Yeah.
Yes. All right.
Yeah, right. So I'll restart, right?
No, yeah, we can leave this in. I'm leaving it in. You're watching this
Okay,
right
okay.
now. So
All right, all
someone
right,
you
all
saw
right.
this. Normally we'd cut this out. We're not cutting it out. Go.
All right. So yeah, so what Agent Venom has done honestly is that it's made this meta like have a defined good deck, but at the same time, it's not like it's a good deck that's like nigh unbeatable, you know. Like it's just a pile of stats. And I guess beating a pile of stats with green power is obviously we have the Shadow King. And then now with Anti-Venom allowing you to high roll like that 0 mana Alioth. Because honestly, if you can 0 mana Alioth and Iron Man, like do you care? Like so like it's amazing, right? So I feel like Agent Venom being a best deck allows you to also counter it with not that much difficulty. Like it's not like you cannot play anything else into Agent Venom decks, you know. So like when we mention open meta, I would feel like it's not like there's no like best things to do, but like the best things to do are not unbeatable. And I kind of really do like that, you know. Like and there's also like counterplays to everything. There is Mobius, like you mentioned, there is Shadow King, and then there is even the US agent, which is just there because it beats up on Iron Man and stuff like that. Like there is counterplay to everything in the game, and that means it's kind of healthy, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a lot of real interplay between the archetypes in this meta. And so when I talk about the metagame getting constricted, it means that we've gone from a metagame that was solely about point ceiling to a metagame that is about, point ceilings and interaction and then interacting with that interaction. I would consider this actually a good metagame.
Agree.
And like you can tell this isn't just because I've been winning, because I've actually had the two worst streams of my entire life during this metagame, and I still think it is like fairly objectively a good metagame. I wanted to talk about Scream because I feel like this deck is legitimately a little bit underrated. It is just a very solid functional mid-range deck, and people are sort of tuned to disrespect these sort of functional mid-range decks when there are so many more splashy, exciting, cheaty things to do. But there is something to be said for slow and steady winning the race. And honestly, I've had a lot of success with this deck. It's a very solid, good deck that just does strong stuff, has powerful, snappable starts against a lot of matchups, and a lot of unique and weird disruption between Juggernaut and Arrow and Magneto that can happen on the final turn of the game, and a bunch of disruption that can happen before then with Stegron and Polaris and Spider Man that can make your opponent's plans in terms of where they plan on allocating their resources go awry. This is paired with powerful scalers like Craven and especially Scream, which give you upside for that disruption. And I think most importantly, you're not actually playing anything that has bad stats. Nothing in this deck is like actively bad numbers wise, it's all just good. And this other stuff is additional. You get this stuff additional to the good bodies that you're playing. And so, one of the major effects that I think Anti-Venom has had in terms of this sort of metagame constriction is that it's dragged the point ceiling down enough that a deck like this can really succeed again. And I think that's a really good spot for the metagame to be in. I like this is sort of like not necessarily my canary in the coal mine, like my reverse canary in the coal mine. Like if this deck is able to succeed and do well, I think that means the metagame is pretty good. Now, it is worth pointing out that I used to think that about Destroy. And so we've gone from a place where I was like happy when Destroy was good to happy when this is good. And I think that does represent a meaningful power creep because this deck, probably in like 95% of other Marvel Snap metagames, would be easily the best deck in the game. Like, imagine playing this instead of Silky Smooth. We'd just absolutely dominate, right? You take this deck to any other time in the game, it'd be the best deck in the game and wouldn't be close because this is what decks used to be like. And I think it's good that you can just play fair, I'm going to play a card a turn mid range. And I like that. It also has the advantage of mostly being immune to the popular tech cards right now. It's not getting hit a lot by Luke Cage. It's not getting hit a lot by Mobius. It can play through Alioth because it just has stats. And that's a really good spot to be in.
Yeah, as you said that second last pointer about the silky smooth thing, I had to rewire my brain to think of something else to say because I was the moment we talked about this deck, I was like, isn't this like the new age silky
Yeah,
smooth
it
kind of thing
is.
whereby it's fair points, not really counterable, doesn't have the highest ceiling ever, but there's no way it's that low as well because it's just lots of good stats with additional effects, right?
Yep.
It's like in the past, the silk jumping around gets your Craven to a certain stat level. This is kind of like the same thing, just that you're moving your opponent's stuff around instead. And then the baseline power of everything in your deck is like it's not green power, it's just good numbers, with additional maybe green power. So like, yeah, this just feels like the silky smooth of the current meta, albeit a bit stronger in terms of overall power. So yeah, I like the idea behind this deck. I'm just a little bit maybe not as high on this as you, because I feel like the times where I see Scream work is not a lot. I feel like this deck needs a few more like things to go according to plan and what Silky Smooth used to do. Like this one feels like you need to draw the
You got to
the
scream
Scream
on
on
two.
curve.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need to get the Scream on two, and then you need to. I mean, if you don't get the Scream on two, yes, you're still moving stuff around, and your stuff that you're playing is still like decent stats. But like, you lose a powerhouse, right? The moment you don't draw the Scream kind of early. So I get it, but just maybe a little bit lower on the hype than you are.
Yeah, and I think like when we talk about like immunity to tech cards, it's not immune to tech cards, right? Like Luke Cage still hurts you. You're not taking 2 points off with the Scream right now. Shadow King can still hurt you. You have Craven and Scream that scale upwards, right? This is not immune to tech cards. Even Mobius can still hurt you because you play Miles Morales.
Yeah.
But those cards are dramatically better against other decks, basically. And if you were playing any other similar mid-range deck, like let's say you were playing Sarah, well, you just lose when they play the Mobius. You just die. You're done. Unless you rogue it. And if they played it on turn 5, you're just absolutely screwed, right? And so like these cards are less effective. And I think that speaks to the quality of the tech cards in the metagame right now, which is they're kind of effective in most matchups. They're never really all that bad, but this is one where they're like fairly minimally effective compared to the like absolute powerhouses they can be in other situations. Typically, we don't cover all of the cards of a new season in an episode of 8 Cubes. We typically prefer to cover them one by one as they come out so we can give them their due diligence. But I did want to give special mention to the card Fenris Wolf, a 2/3 activate with the ability to resurrect the strongest, or is it highest power or strongest? I think it's highest cost card that has been destroyed or discarded by your opponent. That means there are a couple of very specific interactions that are probably worth talking about. Interaction number one, maybe it goes in a mill deck, right? Like this is the kind of thing that wants to be in a deck with Gladiator, so it always has targets. It wants to be in a deck with Shang-Chi for sure. And I think the Shang-Chi interaction is the one that most people are going to gravitate towards immediately, right? Which is I want to play Shang-Chi so that I can then get the thing back. And that interaction is why I put it on here, because I'm a little scared of Surtur. But I will tell you, if I can Shang-Chi their guy and then resurrect it at another location, I'm not
Yeah.
losing that game. I am not losing that game. That is not happening. And so Fenris Wolf feels like a really hard check on the power of the Tens deck, because if that card comes out, that Tens deck is just going to go away. Like people are just going to be like, I cannot play this. Or if I do, I have to armor Cosmo all of the time. And that is
Yeah,
a meaningful tax to pay.
Yeah, I actually really like this card, and so I'm glad that we are talking about it right now. The moment I saw this card, my brain straight away went towards that whole Shang-Chi interaction thing, because like you said, right, if you are clearing off something that's 10 power on their side and then you are clicking a button and reviving it onto your side of the board, like it's like actually like plus 20 power if you think about it. It's like plus 20 power along with the baseline stats that you have of the Shang and the Wolf. So it's kind of really insane. But the mill deck thing that you mentioned actually makes a lot of sense as well, because like milling their cards is not actively having to like purposely destroy something that they play. It's like destroying something that is just like there's no downside. You don't have to plan what you destroy. You just destroy and then you Fenris Wolf activate and then you pull it back. So that feels like the less effort way of doing it. And then again, you also can run Shang-Chi in like a mill deck, right? Like they do run that. So I feel like it kind of just gives more like life to an archetype that I never really liked, sadly. I never liked the mill archetype personally, but I do think this gives it like more flexible points, in the sense that the wolf can just be sitting there and that anytime you just blow something up or destroy something, you click the button and you get a bunch of stats. So I feel like it's a very interesting card. There's also, I mean, we are talking so much about the destroy part, right? But there's also the discard like portion of the deck that we haven't talked about. Yeah, I don't know how this is gonna work. I don't know if Silver Samurai will make a resurgence or something like that, but it is a thing. Like it's a thing that can supplement like that discard your opponent's hand strategy.
Yeah, I find it hard to figure out anything good to do with the discard portion on your own. Partially because Black Bolt is like the best discard your opponent's stuff card, and it hits the lowest cost card, right? The other thing that this card does, though, is beat the crap out of Hela. Oh my
Yep.
god. Like, oh my god.
Her
Where was
wolf
this
is
card two
beating
months
her up.
ago? Oh
It's
my
her wolf, by the way.
Oh my god! Like 2 months ago, we needed this card to show up, and now Ragnarok is over, and he's walking in like, "Hey, what's up, guys? You were late. You're late."
I actually literally watched that movie like 2 days ago
Yeah,
again. So I recognize all of these characters. But anyway, that's just a side thing that has nothing to do with the card. But yeah.
I'm gonna propose something dangerous. It's been weeks of people, including me, saying Agent Venom is too broken and needs to get nerfed. But looking at this metagame right now, I am no longer of that opinion. And especially in the context of Surtur coming out, I honestly have the mentality of just let them fight. I think we should see which one comes out on
Ragnarok.
top. We're going to sit here and we're going to watch Godzilla versus King Kong and we're going to see what happens. And I'm not really sure which one is which. Probably Agent Venom is King Kong and Surtur is
Why?
Godzilla. Agent Venom is King Kong because King Kong is more intelligent is the implication. Like and so like
Okay.
Agent Venom is like the thinking man's points deck where Surtur is just like boom
Just
boom
big.
boom 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 big
Okay,
points.
I
Yeah.
get it
So
now.
that's the analogy that I would go with if we had to do that. I'm not if you disagree, yell at me in the comments. This is a metagame that is in my opinion very good. And I wouldn't want to ruin it by nerfing things because I worry that this equilibrium is pretty fragile. And this kind of fragile equilibrium, maybe it'll just be disrupted by Surtur anyway, but this kind of fragile equilibrium is a hard thing to deal with, I think, when you have it, especially when you're like balancing weeks and months in advance. You don't know that an equilibrium like this will develop. You're reacting to things that have already happened. And I think, I worry that they'll do this and then end up nerfing the cards, and that will be nerfing something like Agent Venom. And it's like, if they do that, I really hope they don't go too hard on him because I do think he's found a real place in the metagame that is not like, wow, he's wildly overpowered. Like, I think people are used to him now. And I think it's a good thing for the game that over the course of this card's release, people went from, or at least I went from, wow, this is busted to, okay, this is just another card. I understand it more now. I know what to do in these situations. And that kind of will always happen because when a card is really strong, people are not going to be used to playing against it yet. And that can be a very difficult thing to deal with. But as people got used to it, I think the decks got a little bit worse. And that is meaningful.
Yeah, I'm actually a very big proponent of exactly what you said. Like, I really don't think we need too big of nerfs. In fact, maybe just buff a few other random things instead, right? So you can like just experiment a bit more. Because I feel like so what Agent Venom is right now as an archetype, as a deck, as like the so-called best deck in the game, is like it's a beatable best deck in the game. We
Yeah.
went through this earlier already. And like I like the whole terminology of like let them fight. Because like when Surtur comes out, when like the whole next month cards comes out, nothing stands out to me as like Agent Venom still will farm these new cards. Like I don't think Agent Venom decks straight up farm these new decks. In fact, I feel like a lot of decks now have to maybe adapt to what these new cards can bring. So if that's the case, then why nerf? Because there's a good chance that these things will just fight. Something will be a bit better. Then you nerf it after you see the chaos or whatever. Because I don't think it's gonna be like as one-sided. Like remember how when Loki was just dominating everything, and when new cards came out, you just like, oh, still losers to Loki, still losers to Loki. Let's just play Loki. I don't think this is the case for Agent Venom though. I think
Yeah.
when new cards come out, we really look at Agent Venom and like, okay, is this still the best thing to do? I'm not 100% sure because the new cards coming out kind of compete on points, also kind of have like certain effects that like make it so that you want to build a deck around those things instead of play Agent Venom. And a lot of the new cards coming out aren't exactly Agent Venom cards as well, right? Just by looking at them. So it doesn't really affect what we already have. Maybe just like let everything spawn and fight, and we shall see in a few weeks if we want to nerf like any of the cards. I kind of like where we are at right now.
I wanted to get your take on the most broken card in Marvel Snap's history. I will tell you what I got when I went through a list, and what I came to the
Okay.
conclusion was Elsa Bloodstone is the most broken card in Marvel Snap's history, followed by Silver Surfer, then Zabu. What I'm not doing is counting stuff that happened in the beta, 3-0 Devil Dinosaur, stuff like that. Do you think that's an accurate rating? Like outside of stuff like 4-4 Mr. Negative, 3-0 Devil Dinosaur, Nova giving +2, stuff like that. I feel like it's pretty damn close, but I would like to
Right.
get your opinion on this.
Yeah, so this is good also because I cannot comment on beta because I was never there. I never existed in the beta, so I only know of all the broken stuff that happened in like the open era, right? And yeah, I think your list is very close to what I can think of, like, because this is mostly coming off the top of my head right now, right? So, for me, Silver Surfer pre-nerf was definitely up there, right? This card literally defined like the point ceiling of an entire era. Like if it's not good enough to beat Surfer, it's not good enough to be played. You gotta play like stuff that stops your opponent from playing, like X-Men, Spider-Man back then. So like nothing else beat that on points. So I think Silver Surfer is definitely up there. Elsa is also super meta defining because if you're not playing an Elsa deck, what are you playing at that point in time? There's nothing else you could play. Elsa beat everything, you know. I also kind of want to think a bit about Loki. Because Loki was like broken for the longest time and nerfed in 4 different variations and still tier 1. Like, probably not all 4 variations were tier 1, but it's like there was a tier 0 Loki deck, there was a tier 1 Loki deck, there was a tier 1.5 Loki deck, and it kind of never fell below that until the latest nerf. So I kind of really want to put Loki up there as well. The funny thing is, I'm ranking Zabu a lot lower than people think, I would say. I feel like Zabu at any one point in time, yes, it was like the best at one point. It was like it was good, right? But in its era, there was Surfer as well, and Surfer was statistically still the better thing to do. So I'm ranking Zabu a bit lower, but I actually am ranking Loki really quite high in this like ranking of like top best cards in the game. So I guess for me it will be, I can't really decide on first, but I guess Surfer Elsa 1, 2, and then maybe third or second is like third is like Loki, maybe Zabu fourth. But I think that's it, right? There's no other cards that
I mean, there's
defined
some Leech Leader.
like what. But that's like 2 cards.
Yeah,
That's
but
not
like
like
either one of them is pretty ridiculous, right? Like, old
yeah.
Galactus is a thought. Wave when she worked the way she used to.
Oh, we're
There's
looking at just best cards, right? Like
yeah,
these
it
cards were never
probably isn't the
best.
yeah.
They were more like annoying if you look at Galactus, but like
Hey man, we convinced Browde and he won a tournament with that guy. It was the best card in the game for like 1 week. We got 1 week
yeah.
out of it. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for making it through that episode. As always, I've been KM Best. He has been Lambie Series, and I actually wanted to let you know that I've been putting these episodes on Spotify. You can find a link in the description. I know a lot of people listen to these like a podcast, so it's a podcast. As always, I've been KM Best. You've been phenomenal. He's been Lambie Series. I pointed the right direction, and he's going to take us out of here.
Thank you so much for being here. Like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Bye bye.